Welcome back to Boilers in the Stands. I am your host, Joe Jackson. Alongside me, as always, is my co-host, Kraig Bowers. We are here to preview Purdue's regular season finale, heading over to Champaign, taking on Illinois in the final game of the regular season. That'll be Friday. It is an 8 o'clock Eastern time tip on Fox. So Purdue, it felt like they've played about 25 Friday games this week, and I guess this won't be the final one, assuming they play Friday on the Big Ten tournament, which we would guess that they will be. But regardless, it's been a lot of Friday games, and this is the last regular season one. A big time spot for both teams who have been on somewhat similar paths, at least over the past 3 weeks of nothing looking right for the program, and then both teams kind of putting two good games together in a row, and now they meet up for the final one. No Big Ten tourney or Big Ten title implications, but in terms of Big Ten tourney implications, unless I have looked at the tiebreakers incorrectly, which there is always that chance. If Purdue wins, they get the double bye, which means they would not play till Friday in the Big Ten tourney. Illinois is fighting kind of, they can still, I believe, reach double bye status. Or no, they cannot, but they can get anywhere up to I think a 5 seed. So they're still battling for position as well. Kraig, what are your initial thoughts on this game?
Well, first of all, that would be feels like 25 Friday games this year, not this week. There's only one Friday each week, just to be clear, Joe. But that's okay. That's okay. Yeah. It's early. Joe's a night owl. It's early in the morning when we're recording this. Well, relatively, not for most people, I guess.
Yeah.
But, as we look at this Illinois game, I think obviously it's a huge one. Just from the standpoint of Purdue maintaining momentum. If Purdue wants a chance to move up off of that 4 seed line to the 3 seed line, if you've paid attention to any of that I've talked to some of the people in the Purdue community who follow those because they have to know where they're going to maybe be sending alumni and whatnot. It sounds like if Purdue ends up with a 4 seed, it may be East Coast or West Coast. And if it's a 3 seed, definitely closer to home, most likely. So just looking at that, it's important for where maybe Purdue ends up from an NCAA seeding standpoint. Obviously, I have the Big Ten tournament in there as well. I think it's also just vital because if you're that 4 seed with the double bye, your chances of playing a game that has the potential to be a bad loss is just mitigated that much more. If you're not in that double bye, maybe somebody upsets somebody the game before you and you end up playing somebody that at a neutral site doesn't end up or has the potential to be a bad loss. So obviously I think it's vital to win this one. Illinois has turned that arena around. I went to that game in 18-19 and it was quiet. I bought 4th row tickets for less than $50 that year. That would have been the Carson Edwards monster dunk year coming down the baseline. And then went a couple years later for the triple overtime game. And that arena was rocking. Underwood has turned that place around. It can be intimidating. I don't know that it's quite to the level of playing at IU after going there for my first game in many, many years a couple of weeks ago, but it's certainly an intimidating place. I think it presents an interesting matchup too, because Illinois does some things that Purdue doesn't necessarily do well or has issues with. I did have a question for you right off the bat, because obviously this Illinois team has not lived up to expectations. Most people had them picked somewhere in the top 4 in this league coming into the year. There's all kinds of talent up and down that roster coming into the year. Really, really high hopes. They had moments early on in the season where they looked like they could be a juggernaut, and obviously have dealt with some injury and some illness and whatnot. But then they come back against a Michigan team and just look, they look like everybody thought they would look. Does that game, in your mind, Joe, say more about Illinois or more about Michigan, having kind of played with fire for a really long time and it just catching up with them finally?
I lean Illinois with just the way that they did it. It shows, right, this Illinois team has that ceiling. And right now, by bracket matrix, Illinois is on the 8th seed. No 1 seed wants to play Illinois in the second round. Not that Illinois is going to win for sure, but no 1 seed wants them in that second round. That is not a fun second round game to try to get to the Sweet 16 because Illinois has that ceiling. Now, they also have a low floor that we've seen throughout for the past 2 months, especially. But I do like the talent is undeniable for this Illinois team. If they can put things all together, like they can be a very good team. It just hasn't the consistency hasn't been there. Do the Michigan thing is fair though. Like, yeah, they kind of just at some point it felt like it was just going to fall out in terms of they weren't going to win every close game in a row. Obviously, that one wasn't a close game, but it did feel at some point something like that was going to happen.
Yeah. So as we look at this Illinois team coming into here, a team that ranks 17th in the net coming into this game. So even though their record isn't necessarily a real good record, one that is still valued high by statistics, they rank 19th in KenPom. So just another analytical site that still values this team. They're 7-9 in quad 1 games. They do have 2 quad 2 losses with a 6-2 record. They have those ugly losses at Nebraska, at Rutgers, and USC at home. This is a young team. It seems like we've talked about a lot of teams that Purdue played, at least in the non-conference, that were high-level teams that were quite a bit older than Purdue. This team ranks 301st in terms of D1 college basketball experience. So that maybe speaks to some of their inconsistencies in terms of how they've played throughout the year. I think just looking at this team, it's interesting to me in terms of just KenPom numbers that jump off the page, right? Offensive rebounding, 36.1%, which ranks them 22nd in the country. That's something that always is a concern for this Purdue team when a team offensive rebounds at a very, very high level. On the flip side of that, Illinois is a terrible three-point shooting team, shooting 30.8% on the year, which is good for 323rd in the country. And yet at the same time, in three-point attempts, they rank 10th in the entire country in the number that they take. So a team that wants to put up a whole bunch of threes, but doesn't necessarily shoot it at a high percentage. On the flip side of that, they rank 14th in the country in two-point percentage. But percentage-wise, they don't necessarily take a whole lot of twos, but they hit them at a fairly high clip. On the flip side of that, from the defensive standpoint, a team that ranks 354th in terms of turnover percentage forced against teams. So if you're worried about like a team defensively that may come in and heat Purdue up and really force a lot of turnovers, don't know that that's necessarily this team that we're going to face in Illinois. Yet they're still 32nd in KenPom defensively. So I guess from your standpoint, Joe, what is this team? If they're not a team that's going to force a lot of turnovers and be that kind of defensive team, what does Illinois do so well defensively that still makes them one of the better defenses in the country?
They play the math game. They force lots of mid-range shots, and it's been up and down, right? They're because right, the 3-point shooting is the hot topic with Illinois, rightfully so. The defenses at times have been awful, and like that's the bigger like their offense has still been, for the most part, pretty good, even when they don't shoot great. But the defense has been just like at times just not really there. Obviously, they're still like it's still a very good defense, top 35 or whatever in the country. But they force lots of mid-range shots. They are one of the highest mid-range rates defensively. I'm looking now; they're like fifth or sixth most in the country. They're have one of the lower defensive rim rates. They have one of the lowest defensive three-point attempt rates. So they force teams to work in the mid-range. They force teams they play, generally speaking, that really like a really, really deep drop where the guy might be closer to the rim just to start out. Now, I will say the past 2 games especially, they have thrown in more hedging. I have not seen it from them really all year long until these past 2 games. They're also 2-0 in those games. Their base is still the deep drop. But they can maybe mix things in now, and that's where like Ivisic has been a solid rim protector. They have Colin Boswell is a guy that I don't know if he makes the all defense team, but he has a case just because of what his perimeter defense has been. So like you have some guys there, and then they have length pretty much everywhere outside of Boswell and Dre Gibbs Lawhorn. Everybody else in rotation is 6'6" plus. So even if at times they don't have the quickest guys out there, they have length everywhere, and so they can just kind of eat up space that way, force teams into mid-range. Obviously, Purdue loves to take mid-range, though, and we'll talk about that later.
Yeah. On the offensive side of things, a team that likes to go 5 out in terms of what they do offensively, a team that wants to put up a bunch of threes. for a long time, Underwood kept saying, like, I want him jacking threes. I want him jacking threes. He's bought into this analytical side of things of the best shots or threes are at the rim and doesn't really want anything else. Has anything changed there in the last couple of weeks, or is that still the mindset? Is that how they're going to approach things offensively?
I mean, they put up more threes than twos against Michigan, and they put up 5 more twos than threes against Iowa. Like, it's just who they are. Um, yeah, it has been an interesting season from that standpoint because like I think they have solid shooters for the most part. Um, just shots aren't falling in. Like they generate a good amount of open looks. It's got to be frustrating because right, they do take some bad shots for sure, and some of that is part of the getting up three. So there's those you could eliminate, but for a large chunk, like they get up good looking threes, they just don't go in, and so it's like, well, you keep trying to shoot those, and right, I don't think they have besides Yakuchonis. I take that back. I'm not going to finish that thought because I think it's wrong. Right, they have guys that can get downhill. It isn't necessarily everybody's strong suits, and so yeah, like Purdue is a team defensively that wants to force a lot of threes. I do think right for this game, especially, you want that to happen because if Illinois decides that they want to dominate the paints, they probably could in this game, and I think you just rather live with them shooting threes. They've shot well the past 2 games, but you know if they start falling, you kind of can adjust from there. Is my thought.
Yeah, and I guess, to counter that too, a team that offensive rebounds the ball as well as they do. So even when they're missing shots, they're chunking up from three. They're going to collect a lot of those rebounds, 36.1% of them, as a matter of fact, and get a lot of second chance points, which obviously we'll talk about in the matchup side of things in terms of what Purdue has to do well against this team. To your point on the 3-point percentage side of things, right? Like this team only has 2 guys shooting over 33%. Rickhouse at 34.5%, Jake Davis at 36%. But a whole lot of guys that are in that lower 30% range, right? 30 to 33%. So not terrible shooters, but not necessarily dead eye shooters either. Let's jump into some of the players, and we'll kind of, I guess, start with a few from the guard and wing room. So obviously, Kasparas Yakuchonis, 15.4 points, 5.6 rebounds, 4.8 assists, 6'6" point guard. Obviously, lots of people expect him to go drafted in the lottery, even if he's had some struggles in Big Ten season, turning the ball over a little bit here and there. Still really, really highly respected and expected to go high in the draft. You've got Boswell, who Purdue fans are really familiar with just in terms of Purdue playing against Arizona, coming in averaging 11.3 points a game, 5 rebounds, and 3.3 assists, with a 6'2" point guard who's kind of been known as a defensive specialist, only shooting 22% from 3 on the year, but a guy that's kind of built like a bowling ball, and can be super physical. And then Trey White, I guess we'll go with him next at 10 points a game, 5.4 rebounds. Does come in as well, just as a guy to me he's like the do everything guy. I really like Trey White on this team. Me and you were joking, or I wasn't joking around about it, but just thinking about what a guy like that can bring to a team, and just what his role is with the team is something that I really respect. So I guess your thoughts, just off the back on those 3, and then we'll talk about Will Riley and Ivisic.
Yeah, Yakuchonis has been like, it's been up and down at times, but he's still been a very, very good player. Elite ball handler, can make any pass you can imagine. Does a really good job of getting downhill too. Like he's shooting 78% at the rim. Now he settles more for jumpers, but when he gets to the rim, like he is converting. Loves getting to the step back 3, which he's been very good on. I could try to pull up the exact. Well, I don't have exact step back percentage, but shooting over, like he's shooting like 33% on pull up threes, and I know that's not like an insane number, but pull up threes are tough, and especially in the college level. I think he's also a solid defender. Like I think it's probably a bit underrated. He's not all Big Ten defender level or anything, but I do think he's probably a little bit better than given credit for. Boswell, as you said, he's kind of the defensive guy this year. He's had moments where he looks like the best defender in the conference. Um, Shooting has just disappeared. Like it just has disappeared. He was 39% his freshman year, 38% his last year on 174 attempts, and he's 22% on 117 attempts this year. It just has gone away. He's kind of he's the secondary ball handler. I think when he plays well, that's when Illinois is going to find success. But he has moments where he's taking a lot of bad shots and he turns it over a lot. And when that happens, then it's tough for Illinois to find success. And then Trey White, he plays. I mean, at this point, he's kind of like the small ball four is kind of his role, a glue guy, as you said, can do a bit of everything, rebounds pretty well, can knock down an open three, right? You're gonna probably live with it more than him driving, but he can knock them down. Good physical driver, can get to the rim, finishes well at the rim, and yeah, solid defender overall too. Can kind of just again, I don't. He's probably not like he's not an all defense type guy, but he has some flexibility in who he can guard and how he can defend and things like that. So like he'll probably take Caleb would be my guess to start out, but I'm not confident. No, I'm pretty confident actually. I think he'll take Caleb.
All right. And those two ball handlers in this scenario, in terms of Yakachonis, coming in with 4.8 assists to 3.5 turnovers per game, and Boswell at 3.3 assists to 2.1 turnovers per game. So obviously not an assist to turnover ratio that you would love to have from your two primary ball handlers. And I do think there's a chance for Purdue to maybe heat those guys up a little bit and create some turnovers in this game, but we'll kind of dive into that a little bit later. Boswell's always been that guy to me that it's like the expectation of what he's going to be. Like people have thought that a jump was coming each year, it's felt like. And to me, it's just never really materialized. Obviously, Purdue has seen us go up against him before, him try to guard Braden and whatnot. So Braden's should be prepared for that, just in terms of what type of physicality will be there and those types of things. So getting to the last two players in their starting lineup as of recently, Will Riley, a 6'8" freshman wing, averaging 11.9 points per game, 4 rebounds, 2.2 assists, shoots about 32% on the year from three. And then you've got Ivisic at the starting center position, 12.6 points per game, 7.7 rebounds, 2.2 assists as well out of that center position. And he can also step outside, takes about 4.5 attempts per game from three and does shoot at about 34%. I think one of the issues Michigan had in that game against Illinois, what was pulling Golden out away from that basket in that 5-out and him really struggling defensively. I do think Purdue's got a little bit better matchup from that standpoint than maybe what Michigan do, just with Caleb's ability to guard on the perimeter. But anyway, jump into those two real quick, Joe.
Yeah, Will Riley's been fun. He is a tough shot maker and can put up some wild shots that just go in, and it's kind of been the draw with him all year long. Can get to the mid-range, has shot the three okay. A guy that, again, he's one of the guys I don't want to let get open threes. If he makes tough ones, it is what it is. But he's just wiry, can kind of just get to his spot wherever. I'm really interested to see how Purdue matches up. If I was to guess, that's going to be Fletch or Braden on him, probably Fletch. And right, Will Riley's going to have the size advantage. Now, Will Riley's he might weigh less than Fletch at this point. So there is that. Like, Riley is a skinny dude. But wiry, can just, like I said, just moves differently in terms of just like the fluidity and how he can get to his different spots. And then Ivisic has been, he can do a little bit of everything. He's a really good passer from the 5-man spot. He can pick and pop. He can post you up. He can finish around the rim. He can help protect the rim and be a solid rim protector in that sense as well. Doesn't get to the foul line all that much, which honestly just now registered. For a guy his size, you'd expect him to probably get down or get to the free throw line a bit more than what he does. But he is a European style big where he has really good touch, good footwork, can get to the loves getting to those little floaters and things from the post. And so but then also can pick and pop and step out. I agree. I expect Caleb to probably be on him. It'll be interesting to see if they switch, like what do exactly they do. Because I do if when TKR is on him and he's in drop, Evis is just going to pick and pop, and you're just kind of hoping that he misses then.
Yeah. I'll be honest, going into this game, Will Riley's the one that scares me the most, just because, if we look at some of the teams that Purdue has struggled with, it is teams, one, that have 5 guys on the court that you have to worry about defending that can score, that in my mind also have a big wing with length that can just rise up and shoot over our threes, right? Or whoever we're going to put on them. When we can kind of cheat that a little bit and there's a guy on the team we can maybe hide somebody on, and then we maybe move somebody else that's bigger that's normally going to guard a 4 or 5 like Caleb or something out onto that wing. At times, I think we're fine, but in team against teams like Wisconsin, where you've got a bigger wing out there that can just rise up and shoot over people, I think that gives Purdue trouble at times. And if Will gets on one, because I've seen some games where he's just on one, and if he heats up and gets in a streak, I get concerned about him just with his length, just rising up and shooting over who's supposed to be guarding him.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I agree. He's the one that, from a pure matchup standpoint, scares me the most, because he, in theory, should just be able to kind of get what he wants.
Yeah. All right. So if we move to the bench, several guys on here to talk about. You've got Hammerkaus at 8.3 points and 3.9 rebounds a game. Like I said, he averages about 35% from 3. A kid that a lot of Purdue fans are familiar with, Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn, who brings a lot of energy, especially defensively, but thought he's played a lot better this year on this team. Thought he's looked really good, averaging 6.9 points a game. Jake Davis, 3.4 points a game. He averages 36% from 3. He's kind of taken a little bit bigger role with Merez Johnson being out. And then I guess we throw Kerry Booth in there as well. On the bench side of things, I guess maybe talk about those 4 guys and what they might bring.
Yeah, Hammerkaus is the main one, right? Last game, he was the only player off the bench to get double-digit minutes. He is a shooter. He is a stretch 4. He is shooting 34.5% from 3 this year. It feels a lot lower, but I think he's been pretty streaky in terms of, once he sees one go through, it's, he can get them going quickly, but at times he also can, have an offer from 3. Not super physical on the interior, not like an awesome defender or anything like that. Like, he is out there. He's in the Luke Goody role for the most part. Maybe a little bit more on ball handling, but right, he's got out there to shoot threes. He is out there to be in the correct spot defensively and do his job. And again, not somebody you want to let get an open 3. Gibbs-Lawhorn, like you said, he's been, I think, pretty good this year. He is somebody that off the bench too can be a little concerning for Purdue, because he can get downhill in a hurry, and he, very explosive athlete, can just get to the rim. He's shooting 82% on the rim, or at the rim, on the season. So don't want to let him get going downhill. Solid defender as well. And then Jake Davis is the other guy. He was brought in as a shooter. He's only a sophomore, and long term he will be essentially the next Luke Goody, that type of player. He is going to shoot threes, and that's what he is out there to do. Hasn't been, I don't think stood out anywhere else specifically. Is interesting. I just looked through. Jake Davis and Hammerkaus are both. I know Hammerkaus was an Indiana kid, but Jake Davis is also an Indiana kid. I didn't realize that as well. So the 2 shooters that Illinois brought in from the transfer portal, both from the state of Indiana. So Kerry Booth, he's not really going to play. If he does, he's in theory a stretch 4. He's going to shoot a lot of threes. He is a very good rebounder. So if they do that, but really just hasn't put it at all together this year.
Yeah. As we look, I guess then it may be how Purdue can attack this. Well, I guess first of all, just talking about the bench a little bit more. Obviously, we know Dre's going to be pumped up for this matchup, right? There's no doubt he's going to be dialed in and ready to go. So I think, too, just storylines going into this game. you don't want to see him get going because if he gets going, he's going to get pumped up and he's going to do everything he possibly can to beat this Purdue team. And he's had some really nice games this year, obviously, as we've talked about. I guess just knowing what Illinois does well defensively, what they struggle with defensively, where do you see Purdue kind of being able to make their hay in this game?
I mean, assuming Illinois plays the drop coverage like they've been, and as I mentioned, they've played some hedge the last 2 games, but their base is a deep drop. This game simply comes down to how many mid-range shots do Braden and TKR make. They are going to get them repeatedly. They are going to be there all the time for them, and so this reminds me a little bit of the Ohio State game where Purdue lost not because they didn't get good looks. They got a ton of good looks in that game. They just simply didn't drop. I just don't. Right, Illinois loves to stay at home on the perimeter. They don't want to help. They want to make it a 2-on-2 game. They limit threes. Like, yes, you can try and run stuff off ball for Lawyer and CJ and them, but this is a game especially where it just feels like Braden, TKR pick and roll, run it over and over and over again because good looks are going to be there pretty much all the time.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of my same thought coming into this. Illinois does a pretty decent job of limiting 3-point attempts as well, right? From a defensive standpoint. So
yeah, 3rd lowest rate in the country. They stay at home.
Yeah. So I think it's going to be a lot of that, right? TKR, Braden Smith, mid-range game. And if they do what they do, we know what TKR does. I think Painter said in the press conference the other day, he was anywhere between mid 60 to low 70% on that little mid-range push shot, depending on the time of the year that you look at it. And then obviously we know what Braden can do in the mid-range game, and Braden's stroke has certainly been there the last couple of games. On the flip side of that, defensively, where do you think the challenges are, and what does Purdue have to do well in this game to slow Illinois down?
Yeah, first thing's just going to contain penetration, and that's obviously not a strong suit for Purdue, but contain some penetration better. And right, this is an Illinois team that will just jack up threes, and if Purdue's playing their defense, they want Illinois to take a lot of threes. So I think that's one. Actually, key number 1 is just rebounds. Like, gotta rebound defensively. Gotta figure out a way to not just get dominated on the glass and let Illinois get 2, 3, 4 chances per possession. Maintain some penetration, and then from there, right, it is a little bit of, with how Illinois plays, you're just kind of hoping that they miss some of the threes. You try to make them as tough as possible. They're gonna take a lot. I would rather them be shooting those threes though than dominating the paint and dominating the glass. So, right, like if Purdue does what they do, which we've seen a little bit more the last 2 games, that means teams are going to take more threes. Like you said, maybe Braden can get some turnovers as well, and CJ force some turnovers that way. So, it is very, very simple analysis. And if this is your first time tuning into this, I promise I will have better insight. Post-game show, which if you like, subscribe, turn on bell notifications, you'll get notified as soon as we go live after the game. This one, to me, it just simply comes down to who makes more shots. And what I mean by that is, like, I expect both teams, like Illinois, I expect to get pretty good looks from the perimeter. Purdue, I expect to get really good looks from the mid-range. It just kind of is, all right, does anybody have an off night? Does anybody catch fire? And I understand that's basketball at its core, but it really feels like that's me going into this game. Unless with the 2 X factors being, can Purdue force turnovers and can Illinois dominate the offensive glass? Those are the 2 kind of X factors.
Right. And in general, I think this Purdue team by and large this year has been, are you going to hit shots team versus, last year you always had that possibility that Zach was just going to put people in foul trouble, and Purdue might not shoot well, but they were going to be plus 10 in rebounds, and they were going to be plus 10 or plus 15 from the free throw line. And certainly there's been games that Purdue's figured out a way to grind things out, but it's certainly more depending on the shot making. And the other stuff still matters, but they've got to knock down shots more so than maybe what they had to last year or the year before to still be able to figure out a way to grind and win. So a couple of keys for me in this game. The rebounding, as we've talked about. I'm going to say if Purdue's within a couple in terms of offensive rebounds collected, just so they kind of keep that margin close in terms of second chance points, in terms of second chance attempts, I think that's vital in this game. And my other one here is going to be holding Will Riley around his average. And the only reason I say that is if he gets on one and he's able to use his length and his size to just shoot over people and score at will, and he gets 20, 22, like he has in some games. I don't know what his max on the year is, but he's had a couple of big games, right? Yeah.
24,
I think
it looks like, is the
okay.
Oh no, 27. He had 27 against Minnesota.
Yeah, if we keep him from going off, if he doesn't prove to like have a matchup that he's just absolutely able to capitalize in this game, those are kind of my two keys. Limit the long wing, keep it relatively close, and rebounding.
Yeah, and it should be a good game. I think it should be a fun game. Purdue has a lot.
We're going to be
have
there.
A lot to play for. Yeah, we will be there live in person. And so the post game show, we're gonna have to figure out exactly what I assume we can just do it there, but it is just us two because our other co-host Braggs will be having ACL surgery that day. So although it'd probably be fun to have him on, I'm sure post surgery and however he'll be feeling there, I don't think it's the smartest thing to have him on. So it'll just be us two. We will both be there, Illinois. So just kind of work with us in terms of when exactly we go live. That's where I say if you turn on bell notifications after you subscribe, then you'll get notified as soon as we do go live, and you don't have to just be sitting waiting around. Or I think if you do want to, we've had a decent kind of chat, I would say pre-show going on. If you want to, hang out and talk with some other Purdue fans right after the game, there will definitely be at least a core group in there, and you can join them and hang out until we do go live. So, Kraig, for the final regular season preview, do you have anything else?
Just gonna add in there. That chat has really been flying before we ever start shows in the last couple of weeks. If you want to make sure we read them, like we're gonna go and we're gonna jump in. We're gonna start the post game shows. So the chances of us going back through and reading like 45, 50 comments to see if there's anything to put on air, probably not going to get through them. So if you have something you really want to say and you really want to get read before we hop on the show, throw a small dollar amount super chat on there or something that pops it up automatically and populates it in our starred comments. So we will see it that way, or just repeat it when we actually get on the show and get rolling. I'm excited, man. This season flew by. It feels like not too long ago, it feels like we were having Matt Painter on the show talking about this team. Just taking a step back, right? And we'll wrap up the season more later on and all that sort of stuff. But also when it comes to its finality at the end, we're often not in a mood to really look back, it's amusing to me as we look back on the season in terms of everything prognosticators were projecting about where this team might finish, what this team might look like in terms of roster, in terms of lineups, everything else. Obviously, there's an injury that's thrown in there as well. But remember, there was a point in time early on in this year where we thought Wilberg was going to be a starter and be a major contributor at the 5. There was a point in time where most of the people in the country were screaming that this had to be a small ball lineup for this team to be successful. Nobody probably, I know we didn't in preseason, thought about CJ Cox or Jakari Harris starting at different times. They both start during this season. So it's just been interesting to watch this team develop. We preach patience and just let Painter and let this team kind of figure out who they are in the offseason because it was going to take some time. Obviously, been some adversity and been some ups and downs, but a team that's going to probably go into the Big Ten tourney as a 4 or 5 seed. And if everything rolls on track, a team that's going to end up anywhere between a 3 and a 5 seed in the NCAA tournament. So a successful season by all rights, coming off of a year of losing your National Player of the Year. Love that we get to do this. Thank you guys for listening. We will have tons of Big Ten tourney, NCAA tourney projections in terms of where Purdue might end up from a seed range and all that sort of stuff with Tonsoni. maybe a little bit of a season wrap-up type thing with Bobby Riddell. He did finally get back to us and said he would grace us with his presence. So stay tuned for all of those things coming forward in the next couple of weeks.
Yep. And like you said, still a lot of content to do, but final regular season game and in a season that has flown by, but it has also felt like a very long season. Like Purdue beat Alabama this year. That feels like ages ago, but flying by. Purdue at Illinois, Friday, March 7th, 8 o'clock Eastern time tip on Fox, and we will be live sometime after the game to do the post-game show, win or lose, breaking out everything that you need to know. So make sure to like, make sure to subscribe, make sure to turn on bell notifications, and we appreciate everybody tuning in, and we will see you after the game.